Today I will be discussing libertarianism, but not from the typical angle of economics or politics. This will be entirely focused on the moral case for libertarianism. That is, libertarianism as a legal theory. But what does that mean? First, we'll have to discuss ethics. Ethics is the philosophical study of what humans ought to do. An ought is what your ethical framework states is correct or moral. The next topic is law. Law in the traditional statist view is treated as a category distinct, but occasionally overlapping with ethics. From the perspective of the state, law represents the scope of its enforcement when it has deemed necessary to maintain social order. But law is seen by libertarians instead as a subset of ethics, as it governs a specific set of oughts, that being, how ought one act in the case of conflict. Conflict in this case refers to contradictory interest over scarce goods. If one wishes to chop down a tree to start building a house, but someone else wants to use that tree to build a canoe, then there is conflict. This desire to avoid conflict is where the libertarian case for property rights originates from. If one cannot truly own property, then one would always be in conflict for the usage of scarce resources. Therefore, property ownership is held up as moral, and as such, so is the defense of said property. In later lessons, we will contrast jungle ethics, mixed ethics, and the libertarian ethic. The libertarian ethic, the non-aggression principle, or simply the NAP, is what libertarian theory proposes to express this fact. Murray Rothbard, the father of Anarcho-Capitalism, had this to say.
The libertarian creed rests upon one central axiom, that no man or group of men may aggress against the person or property of anyone else. This may be called the non-aggression axiom. Aggression is defined as the initiation of the use or threat of physical violence against the person or property of anyone else. Aggression is therefore synonymous with invasion.
This forms the foundation of the libertarian anti-state position, since libertarians define aggression as the initiation of force against a person or their property. Then, any institution that initiates such force would be seen as illegitimate. From this perspective, the state, through police, laws, and taxes, necessarily relies on force to ensure compliance, jurisdiction, and to redistribute property. As a result, its actions are classified as aggression under the non-aggression principle. So, if the state is immoral and unjust according to this framework, then how do libertarians propose to organize society? Instead of the state, the free market is championed. But what is the free market really? The term free market evokes different associations depending on ideological perspective. For the Marxists, it often represents a structure of systemic exploitation. For the average observer, it usually represents greed that needs to be contained. The term free market is commonly interpreted in purely economic terms. Within libertarian theory, however, it is more precisely understood as voluntarism, the principle of free association rather than merely free exchange, the practical implementation of what we have discussed previously. Instead of just free market, it is more helpful to think of it as a market of free association, which can take on many forms, whether it is the Rothbardian private cities, Hoppe's covenant communities, traditional private welfare groups like fraternal societies, charity hospitals, and churches, all of which we will touch on in later videos. Even unions are lauded as a necessary and important part of libertarian thought, though only ones that are voluntary. Libertarians still strongly oppose state-backed unions. Libertarianism is therefore not a blueprint for a singular economic outcome, but a legal ethical framework in which social order emerges from voluntary association. Its defining feature is not what society must become, but what forms of social order are disallowed. This video has only been a short primer, mostly outlining the basic tenets set out by Rothbard. In later videos, we will go much deeper into ideas proposed by Hans Hermann Hoppe, as well as other various forms of libertarianism, such as minarchism, Anarcho-Capitalism, objectivism, agorism, and Georgism, as well as discussing practical implementations of libertarian theory, such as the previously mentioned private cities and fraternal societies, but also current libertarian candidates and their policies. If any of this sounds compelling to you, I would highly encourage you to subscribe and to like the video. Thank you for watching.